Baked gingerbread house pieces retain most of the contour that's etched in when the dough is raw, so you can emboss all kinds of patterns. I like to emboss gingerbread house doors with vertical lines to give them the impression of wood beams. It's an easy way to dress up a door. To emboss patterns into gingerbread house dough, press the side of an offset spatula or the blade of any cookie cutter into the dough until a clear impression is made. Don't press more than halfway through the dough. Bake embossed pieces as you would a regular piece. During baking, embossed elements take on darker tones in the indentations, so the pattern becomes more pronounced. Pieces of gingerbread can also be baked on top of one another to add a 3D overlay effect. Here are some gingerbread doors and doorways that were first embossed, then overlaid with patterned trim. The patterns were made with FMM cutters. Note that it's important to use extra thinly rolled gingerbread in frozen sheets when cutting out strips of trim with FMM cutters. In the remainder of this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a variety of overlay effects for windows and doors. We'll look at window frames, door rails, doorknobs, and twisted frames. For the first technique, we need small, narrow pieces of gingerbread dough. I like to use trimmings whenever possible. Smaller sized scraps also work well for these purposes. Freeze the trimmings and scraps before cutting them. In this example, I'm going to show how to make these kinds of windows. Using a ruler as guide, cut strips of frozen dough that are approximately 1/4 inch wide. Trim them using a bench scraper. Return them to the freezer. For these kinds of windows, you need to create window panes as well. I recommend also using scraps of dough for these. Start with your template piece and then use the rest as guides. Arrange long strips vertically on either side of the window panes. Arrange shorter strips horizontally, resting on top of the longer strips. When they bake, the shorter strips curve around the longer strips, and all the pieces fuse together. Here's what the windows look like once they've been first iced with blue for window panes, and then piped with brown bars and muntins. Here's another variation that uses square-shaped windows instead of rectangular ones. The reason why I created these windows separately is because they were all intended to be installed on curved walls. If you want to use this technique on a flat wall, you have the option to overlay the strips on the walls and bake them all together, like this. Window backings are not needed in this case because the wall acts as the window backing. When 3D window frames are embedded like this, the icing for the panes may be flooded into the cavities created by the strips. Here's an example of how to use the same kind of overlay technique to create basic door rails and doorknobs. Use a door piece as guide to cut the length of your rails using the blade of a bench scraper. Place them on top of the door pieces. Ball up some scraps to make doorknobs. Press them into position, flattening them slightly. In this example, I'm going to demonstrate how to make the twisted frames that rim these doors. Begin by rolling out chunks of dough into thick logs. Continue cutting and rolling the dough until you have a collection of short ropes that are approximately 1/4 inch thick. In this example, I made a lot of ropes because I was working on a huge gingerbread castle. The bottom layer of ropes on this tray has already been chilled. Put the ropes in the refrigerator for 10 to 20 minutes or until the dough is firm. Leave the tray in the fridge while you work on the next stage, removing only a few ropes at a time. Roll out each rope until it is as thin as a string, approximately 1/8 inch in thickness. I like to use a fondant smoother for this stage so the strings come out uniform. Chill the strings for another 10 to 20 minutes. Continue thinning the strings, refrigerating them anytime the dough becomes too soft and sticky to handle. Pair up strings that are the same length. Twist them together. Bend the twists around the doors. Trim them to size. In this example, the doors have rounded tops, and I'm adding the rails after I've added the twisted frames. I've used the same technique shown in the previous version to create twisted window frames. In this case, I've made them in advance and frozen them. Now I'm adding them to their window backings. Here are even more variations on the twisted framing effect. When it comes to the overlay technique, the possibilities are limitless. This concludes the video on gingerbread house dough embossing and overlay techniques. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section below.